Hello, everybody. Welcome to Rumors versus Facts, the Georgia recruiting show sponsored by UGAsports.com. My name is Roddy Nabulsi. I'm joined by Jed May and Lance McCurley, our two premier recruiting writers at UGAsports.com. They also cover the Bulldogs as well. They cover, the team stuff when need be, but primarily their job is to get out recruiting scoop and notes and nuggets and stuff like that. They've been doing a fantastic job. Don't tell them I said that because I don't want to have to put that on a performance review and actually have to start paying these SOBs. We don't want any of that. I do want to mention our friends at the Rogue Shop for sponsoring the show. Without the Rogue Shop, we wouldn't have this show. So if you are in need of any CBD topicals, great creams that reduce inflammation, if you want some of the CBD oils, they have it, and it actually has CBD in it. It's not just some fake stuff you buy at a gas station. Or if you want any of their Delta 8 or Delta 9 products to help you sleep or to deal with chronic pain issues, reach out to our friends at the Rogue Shop. Use promo code Bulldogs10. That will get you 10% off any of your items that you are trying to buy from the Rogue Shop. I have friends who have chronic pain issues. I have friends who have sleep issues. And now that we have friends at the Rogue Shop, put two and two together and everybody's much happier. So reach out to the Rogue Shop when you get a chance. They will take care of you. All right, Jed, big recruiting weekend, the third huge recruiting weekend for the Georgia Bulldogs. The last two weekends have resulted in commitments. The theme for tonight is who's next. I'm not going to put you on the spot right away. We'll say that for later on the show, but you had a great war room today talking about all the scoop and all the inside stuff that you'd heard. And I'm just going to pick somebody at random. Elijah Griffin. Tell me about Elijah Griffin, the five-star defensive tackle out of Savannah. I want to know about Elijah Griffin. He was here. Tell me what's going on.
Yeah, well, the funny thing with Elijah was he was an unofficial visitor. He technically wasn't official, which, I mean, it was pretty much an official visit experience. He did say he wasn't allowed to take part in the photo shoot because I guess that's the NCAA rule because, why wouldn't it be? But yeah, I mean, Georgia, he's been up to Georgia a ton of times. He visited in January, visited in March, might have visited for G-Day. I don't remember. But this weekend he spent a lot of time actually with Glenn Schumann this weekend, learning more about how Georgia's defense works, how he could fit in, really kind of the nitty gritty, I guess, schematic type stuff. And he loved it. He brought up, it was funny. He said he brought an uncle for his first visit, and I was like, dude, every time I talk to you, you're bringing somebody else up for their first visit. Like, is there anybody left? And he said, I've got one aunt who hasn't come yet, so she's gonna make it for a game day visit in the fall. So he's taking his official to Georgia probably in December. He said, gonna take game day visits to Georgia, Clemson, and maybe Oregon before then. And he's got an official coming to USC this coming weekend. But he was like, hey, I had these two visits official scheduled in June. July is a dead period. I didn't want to go that long without getting up to see Jordan. So we squeezed in a unofficial this weekend. So we've said it. We've all said it. I would be very surprised if he's not a Bulldog by the end of this thing. He's not going. He's not committing till signing day is planned right now. But I would be stunned if it's anybody other than Jordan at this point.
Lance, you've been down there multiple times. What's the latest?
With Elijah Griffin, or are we talking about everybody?
No, I'm talking about with Elijah Griffin. Every time I look up, you're in Savannah, you're in Valdosta, you're somewhere down there. You've got to be talking to somebody who knows what the hell is going on with him. Again, we all expect him to be in the class, but if we all expect him, why is he not pulling the trigger? Why is he waiting until December? What he's got? As Jed points out, he couldn't let the whole summer go by without visiting. Dude, I don't want to say it. Get off the pot.
Well, you talk a lot about one of these guys that Georgia's kind of been all over, since the beginning of his recruitment, even way back to when I started working with y'all. This game. I was at this game right here, right now against Morgan County, and when you see this kid in person, you're just completely amazed by just how big he is, and Georgia got on him early, and he's made multiple trips to Athens. I think. We're talking about family members. If I remember whatever junior day it was, in either January or February, he brought his grandma. Mm-hmm. And his grandma was, I think, a big fan of Georgia. And, I think that he wants to play somewhere where his family approves. And every time, he comes up to Athens, like Jed said, he brings another family member, and it just seems like it's always a positive report. He's got such a good rapport with the coaching staff. If I were a betting man, like Jed, I'm going to agree that I think he, I'd place big money on him landing in this class, because this is one that, I don't think that, if you don't end up with Justice Terry, if you don't end up with Isaiah Gibson, you've got to end up with Elijah Griffin out of all the in-state kids. And just in case of that scenario.
It's like the reverse of like when you have a new girlfriend. Okay, I'll bring her to meet the parents, and then okay, we'll meet the grandparents, then the aunt and uncle, and then this aunt and uncle. That's kind of the reverse of what Elijah Griffin's doing. Like, he's brought his mom, we brought grandma, we brought his family, and now we got aunts and uncles, and now we got another aunt coming later. Like the whole Griffin family has gotten to build these relationships with Kirby. And that's what Elijah was like, yeah, Kirby talked to me. He was asking about my mom, asking about my grandma. So that's just there's and this relationship with Trey Scott, I mean, it goes back 4 years almost at this point,
yeah.
In 2020 when he was in 8th grade. So we talk so often about how this is still mostly about relationships at the end of the day, and there's no better relationships than Elijah Griffin's got with Georgia.
And well, I'll add, just I remember talking to him after that game, that second round playoff game, and down there in Madison, and he told me he's like, man, I'm going to be up at, Georgia. He's like, man, I'm going to be up at Georgia soon. And, let alone he shows up, less than a month later. And, like you said, he's got another family member, and it's interesting because, this is the first time that I've really heard him mention Glenn Schumann. Obviously you always talk about Kirby Smart, you talk about Trey Scott, but this is a new one. Obviously Glenn Schumann's the co-defensive coordinator. So him getting to learn a little bit of the defense, and him kind of seeing what Georgia does on film with other recruits, I think that's a new aspect, and that helps I think in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, this line in the story you did on him, you spoke to him. This line caught my attention. Griffin says, only one person in the whole world can say that he's drafted 5 first-round defensive linemen in the past 2 or 3 years or whatever. Only one person can say that. Proof is in the pudding. To play for a guy like that is special.
The funny thing is, because my reading, listening comprehension skills aren't very good, he was saying that, and I was like, really? There's somebody else that's had that many first-round picks? Who could it be? I was like, oh, he said there's not – he didn't say there's one other person. He said there's only one person.
Only one person.
And that only one person is Trey Scott. And yeah, I mean, you look at whether it's – and it's all different shapes and sizes too, I think. It's something that doesn't really get talked about enough, because you had Jordan Davis go in the first round. You had Jalen Carter go in the first round. You're going to
0, 3s, 5s.
Drafted. Warren Brinson's going to get drafted. Zion Lowe get drafted, or he signs as a free agent. I mean, it's all different. Michael Williams. I mean, I know that's partially D-line, partially outside linebacker. Michael Williams is going to be a first-round pick. Like, every different spot has had draft picks and high draft picks. So, Devontae Wyatt. That's something. Devontae Wyatt, first-round pick. So, as he says, the proof is in the pudding over the past really 5 or 6 years for sure.
Well, we also know that Georgia's very good at getting running backs into the NFL right now. They have 6 active NFL running backs, which brings up another interesting visitor this past weekend by the name of Byron Lewis. He didn't even have Georgia's top 3, top 7 until recently. What's going on with Byron Lewis out of Plantation, Florida? American Heritage, we know that is a powerhouse school. We know the kids out of Plantation, Florida can play. Mm-hmm. We talked 2 weeks ago. I said, give me any skill player out of the Miami area, out of South Florida. Give me running backs, wide receivers, cornerbacks. Byron Lewis, tell me what's up with him.
Well, he's a guy that was one of the when a couple of years ago, as this class was coming into formation, he was a guy who was kind of on the radar. And then he kind of fell down the list a little bit, and all of a sudden he pops up on the official visit list for last week. And come to find out from national analyst John Garcia, he camped in Athens, I want to say Wednesday, and it went really well. And Charles Crawford's like, yeah, bring yourself back for an official visit. And he in his tweet saying he was coming, the last hashtag was like, if UGA calls, you listen, or something like that. and he pretty much told both myself and John the same thing. Like, yeah, it's Georgia. How could they not be a top school? They're running backs. There's a Sony Michel connection, all that stuff. So this is one because Jamarian Morrow is a guy who is kind of looked at as a running back prospect. He committed to Missouri. Bo Jackson's off the board, Ohio State. So the running back targets, I guess, to complement Bo Walker are kind of getting thin. Monty Chroma is obviously still out there. So you look at Byron Lewis as a guy that he's, like you said, Roddy, he can play. He plays great competition, we know, playing at Heritage down there. So he can catch out of the backfield. That highlight there was just a catch, I think. So he's got some talent, and he's a guy. It's going to be very interesting to see how Georgia can build on this because everybody, Georgia has come on so strong over the past 96 hours or whatever. How do you build on it from here? Do you get him back? And I don't know what his commitment timeline is, but do you get him back in July? Do you get him back for a game day? Because Miami's all over him, Florida State's all over him. But it's a very interesting development, I guess, to say the least, is Byron Lewis all of a sudden showing up for an official.
I'd be happy if they had any of his highlights that weren't shot on a potato. I'm watching these videos and I'm like, the hell, I guess he's in there. Seeing a lot of future casts to Miami, which makes sense. I mean, every kid that is in the Miami area will get some future cast, especially from the fans down there. They think they're going to get all of them. But Lance, I think if you're in the Miami area, you got James Coley on staff.
Yeah.
I think this gives Georgia, plus, being tied for having the most running backs in the NFL currently. But I think if you have James Coley on staff, you've got a leg up, if you will.
Yeah. I mean, you always talk about that South Florida connection plantation. That's about as south of Florida as you can get geography wise, I believe. And like you said a couple weeks ago, Roddy, you want to take a kid out of Savannah. You want to take a kid out of South Georgia. You also want to take a kid out of South Florida too. And this is Coley's, where Coley's from. It's fertile recruiting ground. And, this is a name that, like Jed said, just popped up over the weekend. And, just reading the comments that this kid had, I mean, it sounds like, this is one that, Georgia picked up some momentum for. I'd maybe give it a couple days to, let him get off the high and to talk to him again. But I mean, this is one where I think that from what I've been told, Georgia's a major player in now, regardless if, some of those future casts are from Miami.
Byron Lewis or Chroma?
Give me Byron Lewis all day.
Jed?
I mean, Chrome, let's see, what do we have Lewis listed at? Chroma's probably bigger.
Yeah.
I don't know. I like Usmani Chroma. I do. But also I haven't seen Byron Lewis. But I think based on those highlights, Lewis might be more of your pass catching, more of a dual threat, I would guess. I would say.
All-purpose back, APB?
Yeah, kind of a Kenny McIntosh or
And Chroma can do that too. I've seen
a
decent amount of lead time as well. But again, the fact that you work him in on an official visit is noteworthy, to say the least. So I mean, right now it looks like it's Lewis and Chroma, unless I'm just totally blanking on somebody, which has happened before. It really seems like those two guys to complement Bo Walker, and then you go from there.
Or do you let Todd Robinson line up in this running back?
That's true.
Yeah.
And that could be something that's decided depending on how this class shakes out. Todd Robinson shows up January 6th or whatever. I'm like, yeah, I know we told you DB, but we ended up getting, like last year, 4 top 150 defensive backs or whatever. So maybe we'll try running back. And that's possible. And I'm sure, I don't know, I guess I would assume that has been communicated to Todd that running back isn't impossible. So, but yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how it works out. And somebody else could pop up. I mean, Byron Lewis at this time last week, we didn't have Byron Lewis on the radar. Somebody could pop up that cookout weekend at the end of July, pop up for game day visits, whatever. So, going to be very interesting to see how the running back board shakes out because a couple of these guys are off the board now.
And I will say, since I went and saw Todd Robinson last week, and Jed, you saw him, what was it, like a month ago?
Mhm.
When he kind of popped up on the radar. Great athlete. I mean, just nothing but kind words to say from his head coach, Shelton Felton, who coached another Bulldog as well at Chris County down in South Georgia, and Quay Walker. And he was like, man, he's got kind of that build like Quay. He compared him to when Quay was like a sophomore, even though, Quay played linebacker and, on the line. But he said, man, the speed that this kid has and the knowledge that he has about a football field, just being able to read defense as quarterback, and then, use his skills at running back to kind of, read through gaps is just absolutely amazing. And he's super talented. So I could see that happen as well.
Love it. All right, let's move on to another guy by the name of Bryce Davis, strong side defensive end out of Grimsley, North Carolina. Great football played in that area. Our own Coach Donovan's from that neck of the woods, knows that area pretty well. Bryce Davis in for a visit. What's the latest on Mr. Davis?
Well, this was actually Bryce. Originally, his top three is Georgia, Clemson, and Duke. According to his Twitter, he's got an official visit to South Carolina coming this weekend as well. But Georgia it's kind of been a Georgia and Clemson battle, it seemed like, for a while. And obviously, the way Clemson does theirs, all the official visits that first weekend in June. So Georgia gets the last official visit out of the three contenders, and it went really – let me try that again. Went really well. The bomb with Jadera Uzo-Derive is great. I want to say this is maybe his third visit this year, at least second. And, he's the 5-tech – hand in the dirt, stand up some, that kind of role. I don't think he's quite as long and rangy as like a Darren Nickanagbin is, but a very good player that Jadera Uzo-Derive has been all over for a long time. And Trent said it in his War Room notes last night. He would be surprised if Davis is not in the class by the time this thing is said and done. So I'm with him. I think Georgia ends up with him. You got Jamal Jarrett on the team, former high school teammate. That never hurts. He has a commitment date. I don't know what it is off the top of my head, set for July. I remember seeing that middle of July, maybe. So, but Georgia's had 2 or 3 kids already jumped the gun on their playing commitment date. So, whether he announces tomorrow or in July, I think he's going to be a Bulldog in the end.
July 20th.
There you go.
Just checked. This is another one of those kids. I think Georgia's been high on for a long time. I think they picked up a lot of steam. What was it, Jed? How many times did he visit last season? Was it twice, or was it maybe only once?
Yeah, I want to say twice. He has been in Athens a lot. And Greensboro, man, it's not –
it's 5-6 hours away.
Yeah, it's probably 4.5 to 5 to get down to Athens. It's not a super short trip, especially like you just said, Lance. We were talking about game days, talking about getting there after a game on a Friday night. So he has been in Athens a lot for a guy who lives that far away.
Mm-hmm. And and he's just watching, just real explosive off the edge. This is kind of a Trayvon Walker prototype. I know that they make that comparison a lot, but I mean,
he just killed a man.
Yeah. These teams on this film, if you're watching, they're trying to run a read route just across the field, and he's lined up on the edge. He makes a perfect read, cuts and just jumps over the pile for tackle. Ooh, yeah, he just killed somebody. So this is another one that I think Georgia's high on, and we don't know how many defensive linemen they're going to take in this class, but might as well. Like you said, a couple of Christian Garrett popped early last Sunday. Why not go ahead and solidify your spot now?
Well, that makes sense. Speaking of solidifying your spot, we've been talking a lot about the wide receivers, especially with Georgia landing Talon Taylor last week. Huge get, number 29 player in the nation. We've talked about them going, and they hosted C.J. Wiley last weekend. Before that, they had Travis Smith Jr. in there. Tell me about Jarrell Boulder, because this was not one. Yeah. When we talked about the 8 possible guys that Georgia might wind up adding to their wide receiver room, I don't remember us saying Boulder a whole lot.
Nope.
Well, Boulder is funny because when we went to the Under Armour camp in Charlotte, he was there, and Georgia had like James Coley had just reoffered. They had a relationship with South Carolina, but he was also kind of like that Sam Turner. I was like, yeah, well, he wants me to come work out, and I was like, okay, well, I get it, but there's also so many guys higher on the board. Now you show up for an official visit, which is big in itself, and both myself and Trent have heard this is a guy Georgia wants, a committable offer. I don't know that he's 6 foot. I've only seen him in person once. He's a little Sokovie Whitish, like he's got big hops in the little dude's body. Very athletic, pretty twitchy. He seems like a slot guy, which you look at the guys they're bringing in, they don't really have a slot type guy yet. So if they want to add one of those guys, Jarrell Boulder would be a good place to start. And this is one that I think we could keep an eye on, because you look at his other official visits. I guess I probably should have looked that up before I said that. Georgia is this weekend has several guys where Georgia is the big dog involved in their recruitment. Like,
the others were like
Georgia,
Duke and Cincinnati, and
I know he's
and like I know we're going to get to him in a little bit, but Deola Awolaja is the same way. Rashad Johnson is a little bit of the same way. So it's an interesting, I guess, move there. Let's see. So we took an official to Virginia, and let's see what Twitter has for us. Visits locked in for the month of June. We can always count on Sam Spiegelman to live scroll the internet here. So also this weekend, this Georgia weekend, replaced the trip to Duke to begin with. The 3 visits he had were Virginia, Duke, which turned into Georgia, and North Carolina State. So
if you can't beat out North Carolina State and Duke and Virginia for a kid that you want,
that's
we're not crapping on those teams.
It's very interesting to see him, kind of like Byron Lewis. He's a guy who you kind of put on the back burner a little bit, and then all of a sudden he pops up, and you're like, oh, this is one we really need to pay attention to now. So, and Trent mentioned this too, because the thinking has been how many receivers they're going to take. And Trent had it last night. Trent, who is shirking his responsibilities on vacation with his family or whatever. Georgia could end up taking 4 or 5 high school kids in this class. You've already got 2. There's CJ Wiley out there. There's Travis Smith. There's Jarrell Boulder. There's Landon Roldan, who earned a Georgia offer last week and will officially visit this weekend. There's some serious meat on the bone there, and it could be that they end up taking a guy or 2 more than maybe we thought they would at some point.
Mm-hmm. Honestly, I would take. We thought, looking at numbers, we thought 3 or 4, but you need so many wide receivers. You play so many of them. It's just like Kirby when he takes defensive backs. It's like, hey, you got 4 cornerbacks in this class. You can only play 2 of them. Yeah, but play to the portal.
Mm-hmm.
Look, if it doesn't work out for you, young man, you can go in the portal with our blessing. It used to be embarrassing if you'd have 20 kids going to the portal. Year 3, year 4 of this, I don't think it's going to be that big a deal.
It's just what it is. And listen, and this change could be, James Coley and Kirby Smart, they know what the roster could look like in January 25 better than we do. They could already know, okay, we think this guy's going to leave, this guy's going to leave, and this guy's going to leave, or whatever. Like in addition to the guys graduating and whatever. So they could know, okay, we were thinking it might be 4, now we might need to up that to 5 a little bit. So yeah, it's interesting to see more and more of these guys. I mean, again, we're hearing that these are legit offers, and for guys like Boulder and for guys like Landon Roland, they can't. Like if it's not a committable offer now, I don't know what else you're going to do, because you camped, you worked out, you've done what you need to do. So definitely a guy to keep an eye on. As of now, we're expecting Boulder to take that visit to NC State this weekend, but we'll definitely keep an eye on it for sure.
Well, also, if I'm James Coley and Kirby Smart, I'm looking at these guys and I'm like, how much does it cost you in NIL to get some of the top names out there? And that's not saying anything about CJ Wiley or Travis Smith, but they're highly, highly recruited. Everybody and their brother wants them. Mm-hmm. But if you can get a Noland, out of North Oconee, you can get a Boulder out of Marshville, North Carolina. don't think that you're going to have to put up the same money through NIL packages that you do with these other guys. So if they're good enough, it's just like the DB that came in from Oregon. We were talking about him. We were told, hey, he didn't want some huge, crazy NIL number. He wants to come in and be developed. So he's going to come in, bust his ass, and try to be, the next Eric Stokes or Malachi Starks. Like, fine, we got room for you. Now, if it doesn't work out, you can go somewhere else, and you will be a highly sought-after item because you'll have played at Georgia. So for any of these kids, it doesn't work out, you got it. And then you can still go into the portal and get a guy who's a proven commodity. So our normal calculus as to how many players they're going to take, and there's some questions on the vault about this, how many they're going to take at certain positions. We can't do the calculus we've done for the last 20 years because there's just too much variation in how many guys transfer, how many guys transfer in, transfer out, who wants crazy NIL numbers, who doesn't. It's there's a lot more going into these decisions than we've ever seen in the past. So it's a bit interesting. Speaking of a guy that we don't talk about a whole lot, like we didn't talk about Jarrell a whole lot, but Deola Awolaja, offensive tackle, 6'6", out of Duluth, Georgia. That's an interesting character. What's the latest on Deola?
I think if I'm not mistaken, Georgia really kind of picked up steam for him. Was it later this spring?
Yeah, so he came to watch practice. I believe it was the 23rd, that Saturday, and got an offer then. And his recruitment has really just picked up since January. He had some smaller offers, and then this spring has kind of picked up some. And he's another one where, he took a visit to Ole Miss, took a visit to Georgia Tech, and the Georgia visit was supposed to be this coming weekend, and Georgia bumped off South Florida, which was, I believe, one of his first offers. So this is another one where the competition isn't the normal foes Georgia's going against. So he's a guy, he told me in March that Georgia gave him, that Stacey Searles threw out a Broderick Jones comparison. And as you hear that, you're, because we saw him at the Atlanta camp, at the Atlanta Rivals camp. He's a long, rangy, athletic guy, probably pretty raw, but a lot of tools, to work with there. And I think Georgia's in a really good spot for him coming out of this weekend. I think I'd probably say they're in the driver's seat right now, just because you've got the comparison, the Broderick Jones comparison. It's so easy. It's like, yeah, he's a guy that we developed and he's a first round pick. I mean, it's such an easy sell. That combined with proximity to home, which, obviously Georgia Tech has too, but I think Georgia's in a really good spot for Deola coming out of the weekend.
And when I was texting, I haven't interviewed him yet, but when I've been texting him back and forth, he said that he doesn't have any more official visits at least lined up right now. And you talk about, I don't think he has decision dates set, but you talk about ones that just kind of popped in the last couple of weeks. This could be one to watch within the next few days leading up to a week. I feel like just because there's Georgia made their mark. Georgia could have made their mark this weekend and, proven how much they want him. And, he could go ahead and pull the trigger.
Yeah, he's got the first 5 clips on his highlight reels are all pancakes. He's not fast coming off the ball at all.
No. He's very raw, like Jed said, but I mean, he plays in a high class here in Georgia. I believe Duluth is at least 5 or 6A or last year, and plays good competition. So, I think, this is a kid that if he ends up at Georgia, buys into the program, he's only going to get better.
Coach Hayes says it's a damn nice pull and flathead on that defensive end. Well, yeah, I mean, he pulls out there. Again, he's not getting there fast, but every kid he gets his hands on, he's driving them to the whistle, laying on top of them, put them in the dirt. You give Stacey Searles that guy, he knows what to do with him. So I'm watching this. I remember now because that was the kid I kept asking about at the camp. I'm like, who is that? And you were saying Deola and giving me his last name, and I just wasn't hearing it. So I'd ask you, like, again, 5 minutes later, hey, Jed, who is that? You're like, they're
And I
pointing to the
want
list.
to, I could
Roddy,
be wrong. I want to say he had Georgia gloves on at that camp too.
yeah, I think you're right. That was
The rain kind of fogged memory there a little bit, but I could be. I think I remember that right. And again, I mean, he's really he's a long, athletic dude. He can get out of space. Yeah, there's a lot to, like you said, Lance. If you get him into the program, but again, with so many, I assume a kid is enrolling early at this point until I'm told different. And you get him there in January and give him a full year, knowing that he's going to be I mean, almost you make the comparison to like what Jamal Merriweather was like, a long, athletic guy that you knew was not going to play year one, and just see where it takes you. And now Jamal Merriweather is a guy that the staff is pretty high on. I think Demola could follow that same kind of pathway there.
like that. No, that makes a lot of sense. I know a guy that I think could play really quickly, who doesn't need to be so much of a project. Big name there I was watching. Dejon Lee Jr. out of Mission Viejo, California. Cornerback number 30 in the nation, number 2 in the state, number 3 in his position. That's a pretty good player there. What is the latest scoop on Dejon Lee Jr.?
Yeah, the official visit. Georgia at one point looked like he visited. Was it G-Day maybe? Visited in the spring at some point, and it looks like it could be the team to beat. It's and Trent mentioned this too. Alabama has kind of surged there. They've got a thing going on with California cornerback or defensive backs right now because they landed Chuck McDonald as well. It's going to be. I still probably would pick Alabama. I just think that lead is pretty solid. He's got, I want at least one, maybe 2 more officials. He might be taking a midweek this week, and then we'll see. But Georgia gave it their best shot, and there's definitely the California connections with Dante Williams that you've got to factor into account. But I probably have Georgia looking up at a couple other teams right now, but we'll see how it develops. Lance, I don't think he has a commitment date either.
No, he doesn't.
So we'll see, but I think I wouldn't bet on Georgia right now. Is I guess how I would say, at least what we know right now.
Okay. Well, staying in the in that vein, if you will, of guys who looking at Alabama. Let's talk about Luke Metz. This is interesting to me. A kid who's Mill Creek, not very far away. Alabama commit. When we saw him at the Rivals camp, you should not be able to cover like this guy covers. He had a couple picks, and every time I was trying to shoot video of somebody else, like a wide receiver or something or a tight end, Luke Metz is out there covering him. I'm like, this kid's really good. And I wound up sending a bunch of the video to our Alabama site going, hey, he's in these videos, use it. What's the latest on Luke Metz? Because he's an Alabama commit, but he visits Georgia. He lives 45 minutes away from campus. What's going on there?
Yeah, Mill Creek, home of Rowdy's favorite football player, Caleb Downs. But Metz, yeah, I mean, he was really good at the Rivals camp. I saw him at 7-on-7 at Georgia Tech last week. He was very good. And I talked to him because Georgia only offered a month or so ago. And when I talked to him the other day, he was very, I guess, positive about Georgia. His family's Georgia fans, and he was very excited about the relationship with Glenn Schumann and all that. So I kind of thought Georgia had a pretty decent shot at him. And he put out a tweet today that was, essentially thanks but no thanks, more or less. He said, "Yeah, a great visit. I am locked in with Alabama." Our Alabama site actually had an update on him earlier, if I can find it. This is what you get when you don't prepare for shows, folks. But yeah,
you did have your whole face numbed up today.
Yeah, and I wish it was numb. But he's, Lance, I mentioned this on the board earlier. There's like 4 or 5 guys for maybe one spot at inside linebacker between
and 2 of them are already taken.
Metz and Tavion Wallace and Ty Jackson, Christian Gass. There's the Logan Anderson kid from Alabama, who I think is still pretty under the radar, who's just come out of nowhere this spring. So there's several guys out there, and let's see. Yeah, I mean, the story from the Alabama site is it's just kind of, he's reaffirming his commitment here. But so yeah, that was a lot of work for nothing there. But Georgia took their shot at him, and then listen, you get a commit on campus, a commit from another school on campus. You do what you got to do, or give it your best shot, or whatever saying I'm trying to come up with there. And they did, and it sounds like I think the door is still just slightly cracked. I talked to him today, and he basically, in the event of like a coaching change or whatever, he would still consider Georgia. But it looks like he's going to end up with Tuscaloosa. But again, there's a lot of guys out there still, 4 or 5 guys for probably one spot at inside linebacker.
Yeah, and this is one of those that, like you said, I never really, felt that he would end up at Georgia even after the weekend. He's been committed to Alabama for it's been a while. It feels like
A few months, yeah.
Yeah, and I didn't know that. When you talked to him last week, that his whole family's Georgia fans. I kind of liked this quote. He was like, "I like to be like the rebel." But man, it's like Gwinnett County curse.
It's back.
Yeah, shout out to Donut Dog. I know Mill Creek's not his school, but the curse. But I mean, yeah, it's just I never really felt like this one. In all seriousness, I never really felt like this one was gonna go in Georgia's favor. Like you said, I think there's other guys higher on the board. Tavian Wallace being one of them, who commits, I believe, on July 2nd out of Wayne County, and Christian Gass as well, who was also visited this weekend. So I mean, these, if he ends up at Alabama, has a great career, that's one that they got away. But either way,
there's a lot of time between that. I mean, there was that offensive lineman that told me there's nothing that would switch him from being committed to Alabama.
Yeah, it's like Hilton.
Yeah, it's like and then he's they decommits from Alabama, then basically says he can't wait till he plays at Georgia, but it's not going to commit because some reasons.
Yeah.
But let's talk about Georgia's number one team. So you mentioned Christian Gass. Let's talk about him out of East Side, former home of Eric Stokes. Anybody that comes out of the Covington area is a baller. I played at Conyers. Those Newton boys, anybody in Covington, those country boys used to fight. Ooh, they're tough kids. Tell me, what's the latest on Christian Gass there, Lance?
So Gass visitor of the weekend. He's now at Kentucky. I think today, but just from what I heard out of some people from around his circle, that Georgia's definitely in his top 2. They offered him, I believe it was early December after his he had an awesome junior season last year at Eastside, and I remember talking to him when they offered him, and he was like, Georgia's, one of my dream schools. He, I think he grew up watching Georgia just because of that name you mentioned, Eric Stokes. Eric Stokes was a 3-star like him at Eastside, now a first-round draft pick. He, not quote that to a T, but, he mentioned that to me, and it's a different position. But, this is a kid that a lot of SEC schools want. He's fat. He's fast off a lot of scrimmage. I mean, just look at him. He can cut, like in this, clip right here. He can cover, get to the ball. Ooh, he just nailed that guy. I actually, funny enough, I went out to a camp today at Social Circle. Eastside was out there, by chance. Of course, he's not out there, but I talked to a couple of coaches, and they all spoke highly of him. They know what they have in him, and he's one to watch. Like Wallace. Wallace is supposed to commit on July 2nd. Tavian Wallace is. So, this is one of those guys that's competing, one of those 2 guys competing for, that last spot.
Muted, Roddy. You're
muted.
Sorry, my wife came in and the dogs went nuts, so I didn't think anybody wanted to hear that. Speaking of Gass and guys where there's multiple guys who are still in the running at either the outside linebacker or defensive end position, let's talk about Julius Holly. I've noticed a new future cast in for him. Let's get down here.
Yeah,
Sam Spiegelman. Sam, is
one in under the radar on us.
Yeah, one of the top guys in the industry. And if he says Julius Holly, he's predicting Julius Holly Alpharetta to be a Georgia Bulldog. We need to pay attention to that.
And Sam spoke with Julius yesterday. And so he's another one where him and Bryce Davis are kind of similar positions. but Georgia only recently offered Julius in the past, maybe this month even, or no earlier than last month, out of Alpharetta, and he's a guy who the staff, again, they like him in state. And let's see, let me pull up Sam's story here.
Yeah, they offered him on May 30th, and he visited on the 14th. Funny,
there's a couple guys.
Alabama offered him right for Georgia did. So
there's another guy. Oh, Rashad Johnson, the defensive back, is the same way. He got offered in I want to say July or June 3rd, and 2 weeks later shows up in Athens for a visit. So Sam's story right here. It's great to get back to Athens. This weekend, it's Shedeur Uzodiribe leading the charge, which again kind of gives you the vision of what his position could be up there. And Kirby Smart's a defensive head coach. That never hurts. Here's the quote at the end. They're a top contender. Obviously, they're in state, but I've been there multiple times. Even though I just got the offer, I've been in contact with Georgia since my sophomore year. We've been chopping it up and going out there. They're a high school for me. So Georgia has, they've inserted themselves into this race fully, I would say. And Michigan had got an official, Georgia got one, and then Ole Miss and Texas A&M are left on the schedule according to Sam. So that's going to be interesting to see how that one continues to develop, because how many of those guys you take, because we talked about Gibson and Holly. You've also got, or we talked about Davis and Holly. You also have Isaiah Gibson out there who is kind of at that same spot. So it's going to be interesting to see who jumps on board and when at that spot. But Julius Holly is definitely a newer name, but one to keep an eye on for sure.
Like it. All right. Since you mentioned him, you invoked Rashad Johnson. Let's talk about Rashad Johnson. 6'2", 180-pound athlete out of Bushnell, Florida. 20 offers. Number 13 athlete in the nation. What's the latest on Rashad Johnson?
Again, theme of the night, he took an official to Louisville, and he took Penn State's not, not a loser school by any means, but Penn State. It's funny because there were some like Georgia Penn State battles. I remember when I first started, like the denied in the sudden one is one that I remember. And this one, it looks like it's a Georgia Penn State battle right now based on what we've heard today. And this one, it's Travares. So Georgia wants Rashad as a safety or a star. That main relationship is with Travares Robinson. And he said he loves Travares Robinson. You could just hear it in his voice. And several guys have said the same thing, because I asked him, what do you like about him? Like, he's like, he's just, I don't know how to explain it. So like you get that a lot when you talk about Travares Robinson, but he's like, Rashad said, I feel like I can just tell him things that I can't tell another coach. Like the relationship I've got with him is like no other coach. So that's certainly working in Georgia's favor. And another interesting thing is he was saying, he said, I am putting myself in a good position as a safety, because you've got Kirby Smart, played safety, defensive backs coach, whatever. You got T-Rob. Basically, it interpreted to me as he is putting himself in the best possible position he can to get developed and go to the next level. So we say it every week that the defensive backboard is kind of still not necessarily clearly defined. And this Rashad Johnson is a name to keep an eye on. You've got Todd Robinson, who's going to end up at safety or star probably, and this could be a compliment to that for sure.
Love it. All right, let's switch to the questions that came in from the vault at UJSports.com. For folks who are unfamiliar with UJSports.com, it is a website that's been around since 1997. We've been covering Georgia football for a long, long time, and we actually have the first installation of the history of the dog event written by our own Rob Suggs. He's a author who's written many, many books about Georgia. He's also an illustrator. He's done a ton of great stuff. You need to check out. It's a free story on the front of UJSports.com. Chapter 1, Chapter 2 will be out tomorrow, and it shows how, when the internet was invented, it was one of the first sites. Team-specific sites that went up there. It's a fascinating history. But we had one just overall board, basically the dog chats. Then we created the event. It was a premium board. And then we had so many recruiting questions, it would just fill up the board. We had to create 2 different boards. We called this one the vault. The vault is where we keep all our recruiting information, and we have questions. We solicit questions from our readers on the vault. What do you want to hear? What do you want to talk about? And first question is from Navy Dog. He says, question 1, with the large number of defensive linemen and offensive linemen we brought in last year, how many spots do you see us taking for the defensive line, offensive line? He's also including edge as part of the defensive line. So what do you think the numbers are on O-line and D-line?
I would say probably right now I would guess 5 on the O-line and D-line. I mean, if we're including edge guys, I would probably say, what do you think, Lance? Probably 7?
I was gonna say north of 5. I could see 6 or 7. Who do you got now?
You've got your nose tackle in Stephon
Shivers.
And then
Christian Garrett, who can play all 5 or all whatever.
3 techs, a couple edges, and a true 5 tech or 2. I mean, Justice Terry's a hand in the dirt guy. Elijah Griffin's a hand in the dirt guy.
You've got Kevin Wynn,
dirt guy. That's if you get
Isaiah Gibson.
Yeah, and then like Gibson, Dickin Agman's on board, Bryce Davis. Yeah, there's I would say probably at least 6. I would say. Again, if we're counting edges in that, which you might as well. I'd never know how to differentiate there because I'm not particularly smart. So
no, they switch it up. A guy comes in and they move him back and forth.
Well, and again, like we were just talking about with Michael Williams. Like, is Michael Williams a defensive lineman? Is he an outside linebacker? Last year he's probably a lineman.
It depends on down and distance, man.
But I mean, it's all. It doesn't. The distinction there is not particularly huge. So,
I guess the question is, guys who can be considered defensive, are they ever going to put their hand down? Are they taking on the O line? I guess is setting the edge.
Probably 6 or 7 at on the defensive front, shall we say?
I'll go 7. Right.
Yeah.
Question 2: we have a lot of 3rd and 4th year guys at wide receiver this year. It looks like 5. Correction, 6. Forgot about MJ. Will leave for sure next year. Plus, we have lost a couple to the transfer portal. That would be attrition of around 8. How many wide receivers do we sign, and how many do we portal this year? It's kind of something we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
Trent tells us the numbers that now to 4 or 5 because you're going to lose. You're going to lose 6 right off the bat. So just to replace them. Plus, you might lose a couple in the portal. I think they sign 5 and see who's available in the portal come into December.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, it's certainly trending towards 4 or 5 rather than 3 or 4, maybe even 5. Because again, you got 2 on board, and there's so many guys that not just targets, but guys have these committable offers. Smith, Wiley. We've heard Roldan is a committable offer. We've heard Boulder is a committable offer. I'm sure I'm missing some guys off the top of my head. So it's, and it's just, you got to, like you said, right, you got to recruit through the portal. You're going to lose guys. There's probably going to be some guys in it that you'd like to add. At this time last year, no one knew who Leonard Humphreys was. But it's going to all depend on the spots. But yeah, I'd probably say, I'd say 5 probably at this point, just the way it's looking.
5, and I don't want to predict guys out of the portal, even though Georgia has done the repeated. Well, they did 2 years ago and 3 this last year. They've taken out of the portal, so we would assume at least 1 or 2 the upcoming year. But
based on recent, that's the first. That's the spot Georgia has, like you said, has consistently dipped into the portal for complimentary guys year in and year out.
Mm-hmm.
All right. CBuck11 says, is it likely that Byron Lewis ends up in this class?
It's too early to say likely, but I would say he's up there on the priority target list now for sure. Again, I don't know who else. There's Lewis and there's Chroma and obviously you got Bo Walker on board.
Mm-hmm.
Lance, am I missing somebody. I don't think.
I don't think so.
It seems like
I
it's
don't
those
think as we talked about.
I don't
we've already
think so
talked
with
about.
with Morrow and Bo Jackson off the board. Yeah, I don't really see anybody else. But like I said, he might love Georgia right now, but give it a couple days and maybe
Right.
talk to him
Yeah.
again and just kind of see where his head's at.
You can't let the momentum die on that.
Yeah.
One. If you want to bring him into the class.
Yeah.
So the answer is it is possible that Byron Lewis ends up in this class.
Yes.
Absolutely. I don't know. I wouldn't go likely at this second, but it's like you said, Lance. You just got to keep the momentum going and see what happens.
Mm-hmm.
What's up, dog? Who's been a longtime poster to UGAsports.com says Elijah Griffin, Justice Terry, and David Sanders. Do we sign all three? Which ones would you bet the mortgage on if you had to? All three would be boom shakalaka. Yes, all three would be. Elijah Griffin, who we just talked about, we opened the show talking about him, the number 2 defensive tackle in the nation. Justice Terry, he also a Peach State standout, the number 1 defensive tackle in the nation, and David Sanders, the number 1 offensive tackle in the nation. Does Georgia get all three?
No.
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
I would bet the mortgage on Griffin. I bet like
half on Terry.
Like a utility. Well, no, I'd bet more than that. I'd bet like a month's rent or something on Terry, and I'd bet like a crisp Lincoln maybe on Sanders. Because I mean Georgia's not out of it with Sanders, but I mean it's seen in Tennessee. He's been at if you're a follow the visits person, he's been on Tennessee's campus 3 times in the past month and a half, I think, including this past weekend for their big official, operating under the alter ego Davis Sanders.
Yeah, I was gonna say, did that hurt his?
He can't even spell his name right.
Did that hurt his chances?
I doubt it.
Your chances?
Well, is Brandon Jacobs going to go play for the guy at Clemson who forgot his name?
Right. So yeah, but I personally don't think they get Sanders. They're definitely not out of it. But yeah, Griffin and Terry, there's a very, very, very. I mean, I would say that is likely. If, going back to the Byron Lewis question, I would put Griffin and Terry coming to Georgia together as a likely scenario at this point.
Yeah, Georgia's going to get both of them. I don't know about Sanders. I don't think they can afford Sanders.
No, neither.
I'm calling like I see it. I just don't think the money that kid is – when I say command, I don't mean demand. Demand is saying give this to me. But what he can command by how good he is. There are teams that don't have a stacked offensive tackle room like Georgia does. There are teams out there that are desperate. Ohio State, I point to LSU, Ole Miss. There are teams that need him, and somebody's going to make an offer at Tennessee that he would be an idiot to refuse, and Georgia's not going to make that offer.
And if we're going to dive into the NIL weeds a little bit, he is a very outgoing, personable guy who again, how much of this is really about being a pitch man or whatever, but he is a guy who you would want to be the face of your hardware store.
You got a car dealership, you want him out front.
Banjo or whatever the big NIL backed businesses are at Tennessee. He's a guy who would represent you very well in that kind of space. So but yeah, it just seemed like because Clemson's been in there for a long time too, and Clemson our Clemson friends feel similarly less confident than they did at one point. I think Georgia's kind of in a similar spot right now. But like I said, it's not over. The relationship with Stacey Searles goes back forever.
He visited twice in a month.
So he's there for the scavenger hunt, which is always huge. So we'll see. But I'd bet against Georgia right now.
Yeah.
All right. C-Buck has another question. C-Buck 11. How hard is UGA pursuing South Carolina commit Shamari Earls?
I'll be honest with you. That is a name.
It's not a name that I really watch. Yeah. To be completely honest.
With the old Google tells I am wearing out this Google right here. Listed as an athlete. That's helpful. I would assume this is in reference to being a defensive back. And again, I think you look at corner and there's Dejon Lee still there, obviously. Jonte Gilbert says Georgia wants him as a corner, which that recruitment's got a million ups and downs to it. Ben Hanks out of Florida was in town this weekend. Chris Ewald, I know we're skipping ahead to this weekend. That's a recruitment that I kind of had pegged for a long time as he's just a South Florida kid who's going to stay in South Florida. Georgia's very much in that. It's Georgia and Miami. Yeah. That's going to be really interesting to see what the feeling is on that one coming out of this coming weekend. But yeah, Earls is not a name I'm super familiar with, but that doesn't mean he couldn't. You pop up in Sanford Stadium in September, October, and all bets are off after that.
All right, from our buddy, a Damn Beast. He runs the A Damn Beast media over on TikTok.
Not Adam in Beast, like I read.
No, not Adam. Adam in be like in
Adam Beast.
Yeah, A Damn Beast. Good follow on TikTok, just like our buddies Chris Hayes and the Dog Father. Check all those guys out. It seems the narrative around Georgia and wide receivers is shifting. Would you say this is simply because of the depth and opportunity moving forward, the addition of James Coley, or the fact that Georgia has had a very good passing offense in the recent years and that it's finally showing up on the recruiting trail? Or is the answer a simple yes to all?
I'll take
slow down. I'll take this one because I actually looked something up.
Okay,
who is the kid that came in recently and said, look, Georgia is – other schools are telling us that Georgia is RBU, that they don't run the ball. I mean, they don't throw the ball. But Mike Bobo showed me how they throw it a lot, and the numbers don't lie. Who was it said numbers don't lie?
Is it Travis Smith?
I think Travis Smith has said that. Marcus Harris said that, and Philip Bell, I believe.
I think it was Marcus Harris that said it because it was the kid from Mater D, and he just committed to Oklahoma.
Yeah, and I think it's more the second part because both those guys Georgia showed us charts and graphs or whatever. And I just had a thought of James Cole. He's at Georgia from 2016 or whatever to 2019, and he's got to deal with this narrative or whatever. And he goes off, and then he comes back, and when he gets back, he finds out the narrative is still that Georgia doesn't throw the ball, and he was like, "I am not."
He's like, "Listen, you sons of bitches."
I'm putting together PowerPoints, slideshows, whatever we got to do to knock this thing out. But yeah, Georgia, if we're looking for what's true, it's not that Georgia doesn't throw the ball; it's that they don't force feed it to two guys, and that is, if you look at Georgia's entire history, again, the great number, 1,000-yard receiver, that is true. And I think that, again, if you're Alabama, say, hey, we've had, 6,000 or 7,000-yard receivers in the past 5 years, and Georgia's had one in 130 years of football, that I think is the message. And I think if you're Georgia, I don't think there's really any way to necessarily combat that because Kirby Smart's not going to, target Ladd McConkey 30 times a game just to appease a recruit. I think you have to sell guys on, hey, our offense gets you ready for the next level. You're going to have more tread on the tires when you get to the next level, and you are going to win a lot of games and I bet they sell receivers.
It's not even that. What Kirby Smart does, he's not going to –
Great. Going against great defensive backs every day. In practice, you've got to sell these guys on different points. You've got to get guys who buy into it. If a receiver is dead set on, hey, I don't even know what a number is, 160 targets a year and 1,400 yards and 15 touchdowns, and that's what he's dead set on, then Georgia's just probably not
the school for him.
Place for him.
This is what they like Wesley here says, do they want to win? Not as much as they want to go to the next level, Wesley. And I don't mean that in a mean way.
Because the one that sticks with me, and this actually was Travis Smith, I think. He visited whatever weekend the Senior Bowl was. And I think it was Brian McClendon was still here, but he showed clips of the announcers at the Senior Bowl talking about, Ladd McConkey, Marcus Rosen, Jack Saints are so prepared, blah, blah, blah. And that's because our offense prepares you for the next level. Here's NFL people saying it.
But see, you don't even have to sell him on that. Here's what what I pulled up is the stats for the Southeastern Conference leaders passing offense. Who had the largest number of attempted passes last year? Georgia. 457. Now, they played one more game than a lot of the other teams did because they made it to the SEC championship game.
It's not that Georgia doesn't throw the ball. And I think if schools are if other schools are hammering that narrative, that is easily disproven. But if you
well, and here's the other thing. You mentioned Alabama with their 5 or 6 wide receivers with 1,000 yards. They are the other team that played 14 games. 325. Georgia threw it 457 times. Alabama was next to last with one extra game. They threw it 12th. So they were next to last. 325 attempts to Georgia's 457. Georgia beats them by 125 attempts. When it comes to completions, Georgia had 328 completions, more than anybody else in the SEC. Percentage-wise, it was Florida and Georgia 1 and 2 in completion percentage. Yards passing, Georgia is number 2 behind LSU.
Who had the Heisman Trophy winning quarterback, by the way?
I was about to say, exactly.
And 2, first-round pick or top 2-round pick receivers?
Yeah, and you could say, well, they're just doing these little dump passes. Hey, Georgia is number 3, tied with Mississippi and Ole Miss in yards per attempt. So they're cranking them out there. A lot of touchdowns, number 2 in the SEC in touchdowns. So you can just show them the numbers from last year and say, look, that's why it's changing. And today we saw that Ladd McConkey, for being the number 34 pick in the NFL draft, just signed for the highest amount that a number 34 pick has ever signed for. So,
got that $4 million.
Yeah. So I'm just saying that is a lot of the reason why it's changing, because yes, they're not going to force feed one guy, and Kirby will tell these kids, look, let's go back and look at how well these phenomenal wide receivers did against Georgia when we all knew on the defensive side that was the guy that they were going to force feed the ball to. Let's see how, Marcus Harrison, he got knocked the hell out,
Well, I wonder
wide receivers. If you know where the ball's going, it makes it easier on the defense.
If you go back to the notion of winning championships, go back to that 21 national championship where Alabama, they'd already lost John Mechie in the SEC championship, I guess. And Jameson Williams gets hurt. And then Bryce Young doesn't have anybody to throw to because those guys behind him just didn't get
ready. Yeah.
So, there's Georgia's formula appeals to some kids, and I think the kids it appeals to are the guys that Kirby Smart wants in his offense, because he doesn't want the guys that are just going to demand the ball and cause. Because you talk about this with NIL too, Kirby values the culture he has built so highly. Well, guys demanding targets doesn't help your culture either. So,
and to your point, if you go back and look at the big game, look at that national championship game, Georgia needs a big pass. It was Kearis Jackson. All of a sudden, Arian Smith. Hey, I forgot Arian Smith was on the team. Big catch. Hey, we need to. Marcus Roseby-Jackson steps up. I'm just saying, you got to count for everybody on the field.
Tennessee game. I mean, I don't want to say Dylan Bell came out of nowhere, but then Dylan Bell is the featured guy against Tennessee and goes nuts. It can be a different guy every game, and that's by design for sure.
Yeah, and just one thing I wanted to add, Jed. I mean, you can back this up, Roddy. When you're sitting there in the press box covering a game. At the end of the game, you're sitting there writing your story. You're looking at the stat broadcast. Look how many guys Georgia threw at least one pass to. It's always like 9 or 10. And I remember
11 or 12, man.
Yeah, or higher than that. And I remember in the 2022 press conference when Georgia, after the game, when Georgia beat Oregon, Kirby Smart said, "Who wouldn't want to come play in this offense?" So,
all right. The next question is from GOP UGA. Says, "Has Roddy donated to the collective to help fund Justice Terry's barbershop?"
That's where our salaries go.
I don't have any hair, man. It would be too obvious if I did that. They'd be like, "Oh no, this guy can't set up a barbershop. We know he's a liar." So no, I have not. But will be interesting to see how that works out for Justice Terry. Anyway, folks, that's all the time we have for this week's show. We went a little long, and we appreciate all of you sticking with us. Next week should be very interesting. Next week is the Rivals 5-Star event. 104 of the best players in the nation will be headed to Jacksonville. We will be headed to Jacksonville. And if we can get our ducks in a row, we will probably do the show live from Jacksonville next Monday night. Maybe just a one-camera setup. We pass around a microphone and we talk about Georgia recruiting. Another big recruiting weekend coming up. But next week, we're going to have some of the best players in the nation. Some Georgia commits will be in Jacksonville going head-to-head. It's going to be great. I just found a picture of me and James Cook at one of these events in Baltimore. He shows up wearing a Georgia logo shirt, and he was committed to FSU at the time. And there's a picture of me and him grinning like idiots because he told a joke or I told a joke, and everyone accused him of trolling. And I'm like, y'all don't know James. He's not a trolling type of guy. But he said, yes, I hear from Georgia every day. I'm wearing this shirt. I like them. They're in it. Yes, I'm committed to FSU, but I do hear from Georgia every day. He mentioned later on he would wind up playing at Georgia. Now he's playing in the NFL. His team loves him. I spoke to his head coach. They think the world of Cook. But it's funny to go back 7 years ago at this same event. Nobody thought that James Cook was coming to Georgia until the Rivals Challenge when he showed up in a Georgia shirt and started telling us some behind-the-scenes stuff that was going on. So we don't know what we're going to learn next week. So stay tuned for Monday when we recap the previous recruiting weekend and we preview what will be a huge recruiting week in Jacksonville at the Jaguars facility. You don't want to miss it. So stay tuned for that. We'll see you next Monday, if all of our travel plans work out. If not, we may have to bump it and then recap everything the following Monday. That's the goal. All right, gentlemen. We will talk to y'all later. Everybody have a great week.